Hello, Flat Earth researchers, debaters and debunkers. For most of us, everything we think and do is predominantly based on the beliefs that we were brought up with. And really there's only a brief period in our early months or years of life in which we are an observer of what's going on around us. And of course we become very enthralled with everything that we can see and touch, and we start to learn about the world around us. And if we were left to our own devices, it would be quite a while, a few years, before we would start asking ourselves and maybe other people around us, well, what's beyond what I know and experience right here and now in my reality? You know, if you think about it, you might enter your early teens or even reach your late teens before you would start questioning and wondering and maybe wanting to find out more about life beyond where you've been raised and what you've experienced. And of course it's not until you do that that you can then look back on how you were raised in your particular culture or environment and how that shapes your behavior. And of course that behavior stems from what we think about things. And so it turns out that from a very young age we are taught what to think of the things that we see around us. And it's natural for that to happen in any culture. It's inevitable. So you quickly go from being an observer with what might be called an innocent perception. As a child, you're not labeling things. You're not necessarily asking how or why it is the way it is. You accept the things, the way things are, and usually enjoy or engage in some kind of sense experience with whatever it might be. It might be the way light plays, or it might be the way something feels to the touch or reacts. And a child discovering something for the first time, like a water-filled balloon, will have a great deal of pleasure playing around with the balloon. But then before too long, our desire to explore and experience the world around us is directed to this belief that we are on another planet, orbiting the sun. And so the things that we see on an everyday basis that maybe before then hadn't really questioned the reason for their existence, just wondered in their existence. For example, sunrises and sunsets. But now, at a few years old, perhaps 4 or 5 or 6 years old, we are being told what to think the sun and the earth is, and its place in the universe. And so consequently, we are conditioned to have a particular outlook on where we are and how we came to be, and the reason for our being, if any. So we all undergo this cultural conditioning that becomes hardwired in our brains and in our minds. These are two separate things, by the way, and the mind doesn't necessarily reside in the brain, although of course they are intrinsically linked. And so we see the world around us and we interpret the world around us with these cultural filters. We no longer have that innocent perception that we did when we were a child, just exploring the world as an observer. We have become an actor in the play, as it were. We've joined in, but the thing is, we didn't necessarily make a conscious effort to get up on the stage. We were kind of found ourselves in amongst the players when we were previously part of the audience. And we embrace our roles based on all kinds of things. Of course, we all come here with a personality which goes along with the conditioning that we receive in our culture. But the next step in our adventure on this earth, in this life, is to look back at that stage in our lives when we did have an innocent perception, recognize that we have come to live life based mostly on beliefs rather than knowledge. And of course, one of those beliefs is that we live on a globe. It's introduced to us way before we've even really started to question it for ourselves, beyond our immediate experience. So we can't help but accept what we are told, because we're told this during a time when we are inquisitive. We may not yet be looking for all those kinds of answers, but we are given them ahead of time. And so our entire lives might take on a path that is dedicated to achieving a goal that was inspired by things like getting off the earth and populating outer space. So we kind of have this, what we think is a smart, clever, well-educated point of view where we can see ourselves from an external perspective on a planet. And because this isn't immediately obvious, we have this idea that we are kind of clever as a species to be able to work this out and understand our place in the universe. But all of this is based on a very, very similar doctrine, a globe earth heliocentric doctrine, which would make people interpret the flatness that we see around us as evidence of curvature. And so in this video I want to have a look at a few photographs and some drone footage to talk about the way horizons appear to us and how we should accept that as our reality with an innocent perception of a child, without the filters put upon us by the globe earth cult and its unwitting, for the most part, congregation. Let's just look at how we see the world around us and how perspective and horizons work, and how that tells us that we certainly are not on a spinning globe. And as far as we can tell, the world around us is a level plane with a parallel sky, as if we are sandwiched somewhere between the two. I've put together a collection of quite striking photographs and some drone footage so we can talk about horizons and what it means when we say things like the eye level or perspective, or the horizon being at your eye level, rising to your eye level. These are all terms that can be misconstrued or misrepresented a lot of the time when people decide to select something other than their eye level to talk about where they see the horizon appearing. So let's first of all understand that all of these shots are taken through a camera, and they will have a tilt, and that could be zero tilt for a horizontal line of sight, which would be a horizontal line of sight along the eye level of the camera. So you can also talk about the eye level as being the height, the literal height. And if you're looking in a horizontal direction perpendicular to your vertical, then you will see a horizon at your eye level, which you can represent as being a marker in the center of the screen. So when the horizon and the center of the screen match up, then you know that the camera is actually horizontal, true level, as it were. And this is of course an optical effect that actually tells us where we are in relationship to our immediate surroundings. And this photograph is a really good example that includes elements of perspective, and we can see from the start that the camera is at a low eye level, or a low height above the surface. One of the things we can see is that the surface immediately in front of us stretches out, and it's a short distance, but it takes up a great part of the lower part of our field of view. And then we see the land turning into sea, I think, as it looks like we're on a beach, but that takes up a very thin strip of our perspective. And our eye level, our height, we can tell by where the horizon is in relationship to the person in front of us. And so it's between that person's legs, maybe just above the knee, and so that's the height of the camera, or the eye level of the camera. Yeah? So we always see this convergence, and that's what the horizon is. In artwork it's referred to a vanishing point, because adding perspective to a painting or a drawing makes it look more realistic, or more like the way we see the world in a familiar format with perspective, and everything that is below us and everything that's above us appearing to converge in the distance. And that apparent convergence will occur at a height that tells us our eye level in relationship to everything else. A couple of other things to bear in mind as well is that the sky is often mostly transparent, or certainly compared to the earth. The earth can actually block off your view. So here's a good example of that. Of course, the distance that we can see across the surface is limited by our height and the terrain immediately in front of us. It has some height itself, and it appears to be actually rising. Here we can see that it's going upwards, as well as the horizon being an indicator of our eye level. And the clouds, you can see, and we would know, are a fairly consistent height above the earth, but of course they appear to get closer and closer in the distance. Of course they're getting smaller. And yes, there are changes in angular size. It's proportionate to everything else. You can never dictate exactly how large or small something will look in relationship to everything else that's in the field of view. That changes constantly. So taking a still photograph of a situation will only be a snapshot, and everything changes within the next few seconds if any movement has taken place, because the whole landscape and skyscape will have changed in relationship. Well, again, we'll see this in the footage, but it's something to keep in mind when we're talking about horizons or arguing about them, because they do stay at our eye level, but everything else around us takes on different proportions as we move about the scenery. But there is geometry to describe perspective and give a two-dimensional piece of artwork the illusion of being something three-dimensional. And of course we understand that what we see is an illusion, this convergence of whatever's below us or above us converging is an illusion, but that's what tells us where we are. And we also know that this is an illusion that we get when we are sandwiched between two parallel lines. And that's illustrated quite well in this photograph, where we can see that we're actually at a high altitude. We can't see the surface of the Earth, but what does comprise our surface is clouds. So we are above those clouds and they become our surface. And then we see this apparent convergence in the distance where we have a clearer sky, as well as some clouds above us in the foreground. But that breaks away to being a clearer sky. There are some other clouds close to the horizon there. And we know that those clouds are above us too. So perspective has given us, again, an indicator of where we are in relationship to the clouds that are below or above us. It's not the surface of the Earth anymore. So, of course, we're never going to have a really clearly defined horizon. We've got clouds in the way as well. They get in the way as well as land. But at the same time, they show us how perspective works, whether or not we have a clear view of the Earth's surface. The clouds basically replace the surface. This is the last photo, and then we'll go to the drone footage, but there's quite a lot going on in this one. We can see the effects of perspective with the clouds and the land appearing to converge. We have the sun setting, and you'll notice that contrary to belief that the sun lights up the undersides of clouds as it sets, we can see that although the sun appears to be below the clouds that are in front of us, that is just how perspective works. The sun is further away, so it has gotten closer to the horizon than the clouds that are immediately in front of us. But we can see by the way that the clouds are lit up, they are dark underneath, that the sun isn't shining up on them. It's still above the clouds, and it's lighting up the sky. It's very blue up there in the top right corner, or even across the top, because it's still quite light up there. It's only dark for us because we're in the shadow of clouds, and the sun has gone so far away now that a lot of things on the surface and between the surface and the clouds are causing the sun not to be seen by us anymore. It's not any kind of curvature, it's just because there's a limit to how far we can see across land and sea and air that becomes increasingly thicker and denser, as well as the clouds that are all appearing to converge on that horizon line in our field of view. So of course it's impossible for the light to reach us once we are in the shadow of all those pieces of land, the mountains, the hills and the clouds, while the sun remains above it but further away. Alright, on to some drone footage to see all of this in action. In these drone footage clips, I've superimposed a cross on the center of the screen with a horizontal line that we're calling the line of sight or the pitch attitude of the camera, not necessarily the drone itself. So we can see what the drone camera is pointing at, what's right in the center of its field of view, and we can see that of course it's focusing on the light at the top of the lighthouse. And we can also see that the horizon is way above that. It appears above that, regardless of the direction that the camera is pointing. And so the horizon tells us how high we are in relationship to the lighthouse and the land that it's on. and the sea around us. And we can see that we're looking across a level plane. And here, where we are at the same eye level or height as the lamp in the lighthouse, we can see that the camera is now pretty much horizontal. It has a directly horizontal line of sight, or zero pitch attitude, and we see the horizon in the distance at that same level. Of course, it doesn't mean that the land and the sea is physically rising to the same height or eye level as us. This is the illusion of perspective that tells us we are on a level earth. So we'll never see anything but level, no matter how high we go above the surface of the earth. Here you can see we're looking down, and as the drone comes down, you'll see the horizon of the sea in the background get compressed and disappear, or be blocked off by the land that's immediately in front of us. And so as we reduce our altitude, the horizon becomes compressed. But as the drone gains more height again, we'll see that the sea expands beyond and appears to rise up beyond the land. And that's because the horizon is telling us our eye level or our height respective to the land and the objects around us. And this is a really good example of that. You can see that the horizon literally rises to our eye level. Yes, the camera's pointing down, it doesn't matter. The horizon is indicating how high we are in relationship to our immediate surroundings, that lighthouse. You can see that the horizon will come up with us as we gain height above the lighthouse, and we're able to go over it. So this is how perspective works to help us navigate the world that's immediately around us. Here again we can see the horizon is higher than the lighthouse in the foreground, so that immediately tells us that we are slightly higher than the lighthouse itself. You can see that the line of sight, or the pitch attitude, is quite close to the horizon, still below it, so we know we're still looking down to some extent. And we can see the clouds off in the distance appearing to converge with the surface. As we turn around, this is a great example of what I mentioned earlier, how the land masses and any other distortion on the surface will always play a role in blocking the sun off, because it becomes part of our horizon. And here we can see that the horizon isn't always clear in the sky. We don't get so much transparency in a hazy view like this. So the horizon isn't something that's achieved by geometry. This one is a great example of the towers in front of us appearing tall and domineering, but as we back away we can see that the mountains in the background take on a more realistic and appropriate perspective to show us that it's the mountains that are much larger than the buildings that we were immediately in front of. Again, despite the kind of cloudy view, we can see that the land appears to rise up with us. As we clear the buildings in front of us, we can see that the view extends to the mountains beyond, and they continue to rise up in our field of view as we gain height above the town or city here. Watch the horizon line there and its relationship to the headland and the trees upon it. As we move forward and gain height at the same time, we're still looking down slightly. We're not looking at a horizontal level, but we can see the horizon in the distance now rising above those trees, and then we see the land and the sea beyond that stretching out to a horizon that remains at our apparent eye level, but shows us more of the scenery. There's less compression as we gain height in the surface that we can see. This one's just a nice one to finish off this footage with. You see a boat revealed as we go past the rocks, and you can see, if you look at the rocks on the right hand side, that the more distant horizon also rises up as we gain a little bit of height. Again, this is something that changes with our perspective, which is an individual subjective experience that cannot really be standardized in any mathematical model. But of course, we've learned to interpret through our belief filters sunrises and sunsets as being because we are on a moving planet that's spinning. We wouldn't assume that or believe that unless it was something we were told by a higher authority at an early age. Because when you go back to that early age of inquiry, the innocent perception, we see things as they are, and we accept them as they are, unless, of course, we are told differently. So the most challenging aspect of this is to disregard, or at least recognize, the belief system that influences the judgment or the interpretation of what we see. A young child is free of that if they are left to their own devices. If we were left to our own devices, there'd be little reason to believe that we live on the outside of a globe spinning around the sun. For centuries we've been able to tell the time, for millennia perhaps, for eternity possibly. We can tell the time by looking up at the stars and the sun and the moon. But what we believe it to be will very much depend on what we have been told to think it is, rather than being told to think freely about the infinite possibilities of the how, why, and where we are. Thank you very much.